You're invited to participate in our transportation planning process regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. Read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.boston_MPO.org/MPO_DISCRIMINATION. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation if you have one. After roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on the participants. If you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact Betsy Harvey via the chat box at eharvey@ctps.org or call her at 857-702-3701. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant, with exceptions, with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact Betsy Harvey of the MPO staff at eharvey@ctps.org or at 857-702-3701. Hello, everyone. I'm David Muller, representing Secretary Gina Fiandaca here. Jonathan, go ahead and call the roll, please.
Okay, Mass DOT seat 2.
John Bouchard, representing Highway Administrator Jonathan Gulliver, present.
Thank you. Mass DOT Highway Division.
Not seeing John.
Okay. MBTA.
Not seeing. I'm looking for Allie.
Morning, this is Allie Clayman representing Interim General Manager Jeff Gonville.
Okay, thank you. I see John Romano entered the room, so I'll come back to him in a minute. I'll move on to Massport.
Hi, this is Sarah Lee from Massport.
Thank you. MAPC Vice Chair. If you can unmute Eric Barassa, thank you.
Good morning, Eric Barassa, Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Thank you. MBTA Advisory Board.
Not seeing Brian.
Amira,
Good morning,
Amira Patterson is here.
Yes, Amira Patterson representing the MBTA Advisory Board. Good morning.
Good morning. Regional Transportation Advisory Council.
Leonard Diggins representing the Advisory Council here. Thanks.
Thank you. City of Boston, Boston Transportation Department. Okay, I'll come back. City of Boston BPDA.
Hi, Jim Fitzgerald with BPDA representing Mayor Wu and City of Boston.
Thank you very much. City of Everett.
Jay Monty representing Mayor DeMaria in the City of Everett.
Thank you. City of Newton.
Good morning, David Kozos representing Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller in the City of Newton.
Great. At-large Town of Arlington.
Not seeing Claire Richter.
Okay. At large, town of Brookline, we have he's just texted me, Mr. King, Robert King.
Good morning, all. Rob King, Director of Engineering and Transportation for the town of Brookline, representing Charles Carey, Town Administrator, and Heather Hamilton, Chair of our Select Board.
Great, welcome, Mr. King. Intercore Committee, City of Somerville.
I'm not seeing Tom Bent or Brad Rawson.
Okay. Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, Town of Acton.
Good morning, Austin Sagano. It's Town of Acton, representing the Magic Subregion.
Thank you. Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham.
Stu Benny, representing Metro West Region, and Mayor Charles Siski.
Thank you, Dennis. North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly.
Hi, this is Darlene Wynn, representing Mayor Cahill and the City of Beverly on behalf of the North Shore Task Force.
Thank you. North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington.
Melissa, representing North Suburban Planning Council. Thank you.
Thank you. South Shore Coalition, Town of Hull.
Morning, Jen Constable, Town of Hull, representing the South Shore Coalition.
Thank you. Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Medway.
Pete Pelletier, Town of Medway.
Thank you. Three Rivers Interlocal Coordinate Council, Town of Norwood, Neponset River Regional Chamber.
Good morning, Tom O'Rourke from the town of Norwood, representing the Trick subregion.
Thank you. I will go back to some people that we missed. Mass DOT Highway Division.
John Romano here.
Thank you. City of Boston BTD. Okay. Intercore Committee, City of Somerville.
Tom's here. I can see him.
Yeah, I can see Tom. Yep.
Just got unmuted. Thank you. Tom Bent, City of Somerville, representing Mayor Katiana Ballantyne and the Intercore.
Okay, thank you. And our ex officio members, Federal Highway Administration. Could you unmute Kenneth Miller, please? Thank you.
Good morning, Ken Miller, Federal Highway.
Thank you. And Federal Transit Administration. I do believe Bill Conroy has just joined us. I'm hoping he can, I knew he was having trouble with his microphone at our last meeting, but I'm hoping he can do the quick roll.
Bill Conroy, representing Mayor Wu in the City of Boston.
Thank you. That calls the roll, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Donovan. Next item on our agenda is the chair's report. I do not have one, so we'll go directly to the executive director's report. Tegan?
Mr. Chair, if you can go to the next slide. I just have a few updates, starting with our long-range transportation plan, Destination 2050. A few updates we have today are that, first of all, there will be an investment program workshop at 12:30 today. If you'll recall, we had to reschedule that from the last MPO meeting 2 weeks ago to following this MPO meeting today. So please join us, and you will be able to provide feedback into the investment programs, which are what represent the goals that the MPO has in terms of how much federal funding and matching funds that the board members and the board allocate towards different types of projects. And then also, as a reminder for the long range plan, we have a survey out to board members about the draft vision, goals, and objectives for the long range plan. And we shared information on that back at the December 15th MPO meeting. And that survey will be open through Friday, January 20th. And so if you haven't completed it yet, please do. And for both of those, if you have questions, please contact Michelle Scott at mscott@ctps.org, as you see on the slide. And then also related to the long range plan, we do have another update on the development of the population, household, and employment forecasts for 2050, which supports the development of our long range plan and other activities. MAPC staff will be sending out the draft municipal and sub-municipal allocations of the population's households and employment for future years to municipalities by Monday, January 23rd. And they will be asking for feedback by February 10th. And you will find more details coming, but in an email from staff from MAPC. You can go to the next slide, please. Other highlights around engagements that we'd like to share with you is to remind you that we have 2 public surveys out right now. I believe we will be sharing the links to those surveys in the chat. And these, again, are full public surveys. So the first one is another long-range transportation plan survey. This one asking for feedback from residents and any other stakeholders on the visioning and priorities for our transportation system to inform the plan. It also closes tomorrow, similar to the member survey. And again, please contact Michelle Scott if you have any questions about that survey. And then the second ongoing survey is about collecting ideas for transportation studies to be included in our next UPWP, or Unified Planning Work Program. And again, as a reminder, anyone can submit an idea. Some examples, we get ideas from advocates, planners, members of the general public, and also from board members yourselves through this survey. So please do submit ideas if you have them, and you can find some guidelines for how to sort of translate your ideas into a submission linked in the survey if you need any support writing a proposal. So with that, we can turn it over to today's agenda on the next slide. So we actually have all action items today. The first 3 will be related to the current federal fiscal year 23 to 27 TIP. That'll be a vote to endorse amendment 2 and adjustment 2. And then there'll also be a vote to release for a 21-day public comment, public review period up to an amendment 3. And then the last action for today is to vote to release for the 30-day public review the MPO's Title VI triennial report, and that'll be presented by Betsy Harvey today. And then for the last slide. So we will actually have MPO meetings for each of the next 2 weeks, as we have a lot of activities going on right now. So please plan for meetings on the 26th of January, and then again on the 2nd of January. And we will be talking about work scopes at the next meeting, including the roadway pricing experiences, learning from those experiences work scope. And we'll have a number of presentations on things like our engagement activities for last year, the LRTP policy around major infrastructure projects and updating that in reference to the long range plan, and a study on parking policy and trip generation. And then also at the next meeting on the 26th, we expect to have a presentation from our federal partners, FHWA and FTA, about the certification review report that was completed in 2022 and that we told board members we'd be talking about at an upcoming board meeting. So please, if you can be present for the 26th, that will be a very interesting and exciting meeting, and then plan again for the 2nd. And that, Mr. Chair, is all I have for today, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Tegan. Any questions for Tegan? Seeing none. The next item on the agenda is public comments. Is there anyone from the public who would like to make a comment at this time? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, if you want to comment during the meeting, raise your hand and we will call on you. Next up is committee chairs reports. Are there any? Derek Karan.
Great, thank you. Just wanted to quickly mention that Srilekha Murthy should be in touch with UPWP committee members over the next few weeks to schedule the next UPWP committee meeting, which is expected to be sometime in February, just to kick off the cycle for developing the fiscal year 2024 Unified Planning Work Program, and go over the timeline and process for that, just to refresh folks and update any new members. Thank you, Tegan, also for mentioning the survey that's out right now to solicit new study ideas. I'll put the link for that in the chat, but the deadline for submitting new ideas is February 15th. So just wanted to mention that as well, but thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Any other committee chairs at this time? Seeing none. Regional Transportation Advisory Council report. Lynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so, yeah, at our last meeting, last week, we had a really good presentation by the Vice Chair, Franny Osmond, and Susan Barrett, Director of Transportation in Lexington. And we really focused on the gaps in the regional transit agency network and the gaps in coordination of transit for elderly and disabled folks. And so a lot of excitement came out of that meeting because there's a lot of gaps, and things that we feel that we need to do. And so there's a lot of potential. I don't want to get out over my skis on potential synergies. That can potentially happen with current entities in the MPO, but we're excited and hopefully have more to share soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Any questions for Lynn? Seeing none. Next item on the agenda is the minutes of November 17th. Can I get a motion and a second from a member to approve the amendments, please? Eric Barassa.
Good morning. I'll make a motion to approve the November 17th MPO meeting minutes.
Ben.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Are there any comments, changes, questions, or suggestions? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Oh, no. Can everyone hear me? I'm sorry, my internet connection.
Yeah, we can hear you right now, Jonathan.
Okay, I can call the roll now, Mr. Chair. David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ally Clayman,
Ally Clayman, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, abstain.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Amir Patterson,
Amir Patterson, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Bill Conroy,
Bill Conroy, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Rob King.
Rob King, abstain. I was not part of that meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Tom Bent,
Yes.
Austin Saganowitz,
Austin Scanowitz, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen votes yes.
Melissa Tintakoulis,
Melissa Tintakoulis votes yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, abstain.
Peter Pelletier,
Peter Pelletier, abstain.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Next item on the agenda is an action item on the FY 23 to 27 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment Number 2. Ethan Lapointe.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ethan Lapointe. I want to start off today covering the endorsement for Amendment 2. If we could please move on to the next slide. So as some of you may recall, this amendment was initially presented to the MPO board on the December 15th meeting and has since concluded a 21-day public comment. If we go on to the next slide, we can do a quick review of what the substance of this amendment was. As a refresher, this is the second amendment to the current TIP, which covers federal fiscal years 2023 to 2027 and included several changes to the 2023 program, which included project cost adjustments based on updated engineers' estimates and some changes in project scope for statewide highway and regional target projects. The amendment also programmed a new design earmark for the Ossipet River Rail Trail and Stowe and included new projects for the Cape Ann Transportation Authority, Metro West Regional Transit Authority, and also some minor clerical adjustments to project names for the Metro West RTA. If we go on to the next slide, please. Since this amendment was initially presented back in December, there have been some adjustments to what was shown there. The main one was a correction for the Ossipet River Rail Trail Extension Engineering and Design earmark. When this was presented last month, it initially was presented with a budget amount of $750,000. This amount only reflected the amount of federal funds programmed to the project under a member designated project earmark. The total budget has since been corrected to reflect $187,000 in state and local matching funds for the project. The amendment table that is currently posted online already reflects this change. However, not shown here on this slide is a second change that we have, and we do have a backup slide for this, but we can stay here right now unless we need it, which is for project 603722, which is the replacement of the Route 2A Merritt Road Bridge over Interstate 95. When we initially presented this project to the board in December, the change reflected an initial final design cost of $27.27 million, up from an initial budget for the current unamended tip of $20.5 million. A more recently revised final design cost now puts that increase to $28.65 million, which is an increase of approximately $8.2 million for this statewide highway funded project. Revised amendment tables will be posted to reflect this update after that meeting. And as previously mentioned, the Stowe project that you're seeing on screen is already with what was provided before this meeting. If you could go on to the next slide, we can just cover some of the housekeeping items as part of the amendment. So as mentioned, there was a 21-day public comment period for this amendment, which opened on December 15th and concluded January 6th. During that period, staff received one comment that was directly related to Amendment 2 and a project contained therein, which was for the Cape Ann Transportation Authority's replica trolley replacement effort. The commenter inquired as to whether or not this trolley replacement effort would coincide with a greater shift towards zero or low emission vehicles and any electrification plans for the RTA's fleet. In consultation with Cape Ann Transportation Authority, staff decided that they would advise the commenter to speak further with CATA directly as far as where their long-term electrification strategies are. And with that, if we go on to the next slide, can round out Amendment 2 with staff's request to endorse Amendment 2 following the public comment period, which concluded on January 6th.
Thank you, Ethan. Questions from the members? Darlene Nguyen.
Sorry, I think I left my hand up.
All right, how about you, Jay? Is that your hand left up or you got a question?
Oh, sorry about that. Meant to lower it.
No worries. So no questions? Can I get a motion in a second to approve the amendment as presented today?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the amendment as presented today.
Is there a second? Tom Bent.
Mr. Chair, I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Motion having been made and seconded. Jonathan, please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ally Clayman,
Ally Clayman, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Amira Patterson,
Amira Patterson, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Bill Conroy,
Bill Conroy, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Austin Saganowitz,
Austin Saganowitz, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Melissa Tintakis,
Melissa, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
Peter Pelletier,
Peter Pelletier, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries unanimous, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is tip adjustment number 2. Ethan?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we just keep moving on through these. These were the backup slides for Amendment 2. Perfect. So this presentation will cover adjustment 2 to the tip. As an adjustment, the changes included here do not require a 21-day public comment period. So at the end of this, we'll be asking for an endorsement of the changes included here. If we can move on, we can go into what is included in adjustment 2. Adjustment 2 includes some changes to both the fiscal year 2023 and 2024 programs, including funding source changes a project cost adjustment for the signal and intersection improvements on I-93 and Mystic Ave and McGrath Highway, and then again, updated Metro West Regional Transit Authority project descriptions. This is fairly brief, so if we move on to the adjustment changes by program, and the next slide after this, we can start with the reconstruction of Bridge Street in Beverly. This is a funding source change. The funding sources for this line item have been adjusted to better reflect a correct breakdown of state match against the federal funds. The scope of work and budget for this project overall remain the same, and advertisement is planned for May 13th of this year. Moving on to the next slide, we can then cover the change in the 2024 program. This was the aforementioned signal intersection improvement at Mystic Avenue and McGrath Highway for project 608562. This is a cost increase of $402,557, reflecting updated engineers' estimates based on revised design guidance. The current budget for this project is $6.1 million, and it's being revised upwards towards $6.5 million. Again, this is within the thresholds for an adjustment. Advertised for this project is planned next year and February 17th, 2024. And then for the next slide, our last change here is a project description change for the Metro West Regional Transit Authority's facility and vehicle maintenance program. This line item is for was originally for discretionary funding for its maintenance and body shop, and the description has been specified to reflect a shift towards vehicle maintenance for alternative fuel infrastructure, again for discretionary funding by Metro West. With that, if we go on to the next slide, we can close this out with a request that the board votes to endorse adjustment to the tip.
Thank you, Ethan. Any questions from the members? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to endorse this adjustment as presented today? Eric Barassa.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to endorse adjustment 2 as presented today.
Thank you. Tom Bent.
Mr. Chair, I'll second that the endorsement of Amendment 2.
Thank you. Jonathan, please call the roll.
David Muller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ally Clayman,
Ally Clayman, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Amira Patterson,
Amira Patterson, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Bill Conroy,
Bill Conroy, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Austin Saganowitz,
Austin Saganowitz, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn votes yes.
Melissa Tintakis,
Melissa Tintakis, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
Peter Pelletier,
Peter Pelletier, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries unanimous, Mr. Chair.
John, next item on the agenda is tip amendment number 3. Ethan.
All right, so the last change that I have this morning is amendment 3 to the tip. If we go on to the next slide and then the one after that, we can then cover the substance of amendment 3. We will be introducing this amendment for the release of public comment on a 21-day period following the vote here. This amendment will include the bundling of the Boston deck replacement for Cambridge Street over I-90, which also includes the preservation of the Lincoln Street pedestrian overpass into the Alston multimodal project that's currently in the capital investment plan for the state. I have the specific project number for that on a later slide. Also, it includes another design earmark for the Center Street Central Avenue Bridge design in Dover and Needham, and also includes the programming of community transit grants, which are a MassDOT funding program that provides Section 5310 funding, which is intended for improvements to mobility and accessibility for seniors and people with disabilities for local transit providers. So if we go on to the next slide, we can start running through some of the line items by amendment. Starting off, we have the 2023 statewide highway funded projects. Again, starting with the Boston deck replacement for Cambridge Street over I-90 and preservation of the Lincoln Street pedestrian overpass over I-90. This is currently a statewide highway funded project within the TIP, but given the project is being removed from the TIP into the capital investment plan, its budget's being reduced to zero, and all of its funding and also the scope of work included here is being moved into that separate document and therefore will no longer be reflected in the TIP. The second project would be, again, the Dover Needham Center Street and Central Avenue Bridge Engineering and Design Project. This is funded by a $2.5 million earmark, member designated project to support engineering and design for future bridge improvements. Again, this is for design and engineering funding on this structure, which traverses the line for Dover and Needham. Moving on to the next slide, we can start to cover the individual community transit grant awards for the Boston region. There are 7 of these total. Starting off, we have the Cape Ann Transportation Authority, which is receiving $122,000 for van transportation for dialysis and medical appointments in Beverly, Danvers, and Peabody, as well as transfers to the MBTA's paratransit ride service. Newton is receiving operating funds to continue NUMO, which is its on-demand transportation for older adults in the city of Newton. And then also Greater Lynn Senior Services, which provides funding for Move Safe and Mobility Links, which strengthens the capacities for consumers and the elderly to effectively navigate around their community. That is $80,000 for that award. Moving on to the next line item, we also have additional funding for the Metro West Regional Transit Authority for its Transitions Outreach Program in the amount of $100,000 for total programming. The Connect a Ride Alliance program offered by Mystic Valley Elder Services Incorporated. The line item is $132,750, and that provides services to 11 communities north of Boston. The town of Acton has additional funding for Crosstown Connect, which is its transportation program for older adults and people with disabilities. And then last but not least, we have SCM for community transportation. SCM, I believe, stands for Somerville, Cambridge, and Medford. This line item provides funding to facilitate scheduling software to reduce the number of unfulfilled trip requests for on-demand service for older adults and people with disabilities. With that, we'd like to move on to request that the board votes move forward with Amendment 3 for public comment. As an amendment, this will constitute a 21-day period commencing tomorrow, should specify that, on January 20th and concluding February 9th.
Are there any questions? Eric Barassa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ethan, can you go back to the Lincoln overpass?
Sure.
So that's coming out of the TIP, but is it being funded with all state funds in the CIP? Is that the difference?
No, so I'll answer this from Lincoln, Ethan. It's being combined into the Alston Intermodal project. So it will be funded when that project gets funded. So it's not currently funded in the CIP, but we were requested by the advocacy interests as well as, I believe, the city to bundle it into that project. So it's now no longer a standalone project, but will be part of the Alston Intermodal project.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Ken Miller.
Good morning. Just this earmark, this is what kind of earmark is this? The Dover Needham Center Street.
It's a federal budget earmark, a congressional earmark from the federal budget.
Great. It would be helpful, I think, if you could, if staff could denote, rather than just earmark, if it could denote what kind of earmark and what year it is, that would be helpful. And is this it's the entire earmark is MassDOT actually doing the design? Who's actually doing the work, do you know?
Well, so given that it's a federal earmark, a Title 23 earmark in a budget, it has to flow through MassDOT, right?
Yeah.
So I presume that MassDOT will do this work since it's a bridge, but I can't guarantee that.
Yeah, could you have somebody follow up with me on that? That would be helpful.
Absolutely. Oh wait, Derek Cravat has his hand up. Maybe Derek Cravat has some answers. Derek Cravat.
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to address that. Yeah, in coordination with the town, it was a earmark in the 2023 Consolidated Appropriations Act, and it's being used exclusively for design. And yeah, David spoke to the process of them establishing a contract with MassDOT for the design of it. That would be undertaken by the municipalities. And then the construction project, which isn't within the current tip, but is nonetheless PRC approved, would be the kind of corresponding construction project that MassDOT would oversee. But the earmark is exclusively for design.
John Bouchard.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to add that I'm working with the community on that federal earmark and identification of design professionals that they can go through a QBS selection, which we had reached out to Federal Highway Administration through, I think, Josh G. Ken, and just wanted to clarify that the money was available in when it was, in the appropriations bill. And MassDOT is working with the town on that process right now.
Ken, you got all the information you need, or you need more?
Well, just that, okay, as long as Josh is aware of what's going on, but we do need to approve, since it is federal funding, we will need to approve the scope and all that kind of stuff, so.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Leonard Diggins.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say I'm really happy to see all of the community transit grant awards, and so I'll be thrilled to see this get out for comment. And I have a quick question. Do you happen to know, Mr. Chair, how much funding MassDOT has in that community transit program?
I do not know, but we can find out, Lynn.
It's
a federal 5310 program. We get an apportionment every year and then give it out to grantees. So I can find the number for you.
Yeah, it's not critical at all. And I just think it's nice to have this complementing, the MPO's community transit program. So thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to release this for a 21-day public review process? Eric Barassa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make a motion to release this for public comment.
Lynn Diggins.
I'll second that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Jonathan, please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ally Clayman,
Ally Clayman, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Amira Patterson,
Mayor Patterson, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Bill Conroy,
Bill Conroy, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Austin Saganowitz,
Boston Region, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Melissa Tintakis,
Melissa Tintakis, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
Peter Pelletier,
Peter Pelletier, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries unanimous, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Ethan. Next item on the agenda is the Title VI Triennial Report. Betsy Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. I'm Betsy Harvey. I am the Transportation Equity Program Manager for the Boston MPO. And I'm going to talk today about the MPO's 2022 Title VI Triennial Report. We've completed in the past year a full Title VI Triennial. And at the end of the presentation, I will ask for the board to vote to release the report for a 30-day public comment period starting on Monday, January 23rd and concluding on February 22nd. And then after the public comment period, I'll return to ask for the final endorsement of the report. Next slide, please. So what is Title VI and what do we do? Why do we do this report? As a refresher, Title VI is part of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, and national origin. National origin is subsequently defined as limited English proficiency. federal agencies, including FTA and FHWA, pass through Title VI compliance requirements to their funding recipients, which includes, of course, MPOs. Next slide. So while Title VI compliance is, of course, always ongoing at the MPO and by staff, every year we do report on compliance efforts to MassDOT, as we are a subrecipient of federal funding through them. And MassDOT subsequently reports on Title VI compliance for the state and all Massachusetts MPOs to FTA and FHWA. So it's going to be a little bit confusing. FHWA and FTA have two different kind of reporting cycles. FHWA reporting is actually done every year, and FTA reporting done every 3 years. And so this year is a triennial year, which covers both FHWA and FTA Title VI requirements. And so the report responds to both agencies' guidance on Title VI. And our practice is to have a public comment period and get MPO endorsement in these triennial years. You also notice that the report contains content not only about strictly those Title VI populations that I mentioned, because while FTA's Title VI program covers just those population groups, FHWA's Title VI program is inclusive of other mandates covering both environmental justice and other non-discrimination regulations. So our reporting does reflect this difference. I also want to remind folks of the overlap between Title VI and environmental justice, because those terms are kind of thrown around a lot and used a lot, but there really is a couple of distinct and important differences in the way that we approach our work regarding these population groups. Title VI covers people with limited English proficiency and the minority population, while environmental justice covers the minority population and the low-income population. The other important difference is the scope of the two mandates. Title VI is a law that offers legal protection against discrimination, while EJ is an executive order that is about ensuring the inclusion of low-income and minority populations throughout planning and project development and preventing adverse impacts, but provides no legal authority. Next slide. The main purpose of Title VI reporting is to, of course, demonstrate that the MPO complies with those federal regulations. But another important purpose is to share out the analyses that support MPO decisions that we have to do for Title VI reporting. And that will be what the remainder of my presentation will focus on. I want to note that you'll see some analyses that look at all projects that are programmed in our TIP, not just those funded with MPO dollars, which is really important to keep in mind since this board does have the authority to approve or deny the implementation of any project that is programmed in the TIP, regardless of funding source. The report is divided into two main sections: general reporting requirements and those related to our planning practices. And again, it's the latter that contain those analyses and that we'll really focus on in the next couple of minutes. Next slide. So first, the general reporting requirements. There are several of them, which kind of are general information for FTA and FHWA about our Title VI program. They include things like certifications and assurances that this board will sign upon endorsement of the report after the public comment period. Any Title VI complaints we've had, which we have not done during the reporting, we have not had any during the reporting period. It also contains the full public engagement plan and the language assistance plan, so that we are able to provide documentation about how we engage with populations protected under Title VI and how we provide people's translations and interpretation needs if they do not speak English. We also include a description of the MPO's Title VI program and the activities under that are carried out throughout the year to meet our federal obligations. And then also how we disseminate Title VI information to the public, such as how information on how people can request language accommodations and notifications of their legal rights. Next slide. So I'm going to start now talking more about the reporting requirements related to MPO planning practices. I'll start with our demographic profiles. So these are analyses that are required we do to understand how the MPO's transportation investments impact population groups, to make sure that the MPO is not unintentionally discriminatory in making these investments. Demographic profiles are profiles of populations that are covered in our transportation equity program. all of which you can see on the screen, and I'll mention in just a minute, so that we know who lives in our region. They do include Title VI and environmental justice populations, as well as other populations that are covered by federal protections, including people with disabilities, older adults, and children. And we update these profiles every year with new demographic data from the Census Bureau, and always include them in Title VI reports, and you'll see them also in the TIP and the LRTP and other reports that we do. So we compared demographic data with 2010, 2020 was 2010 data, and we found certainly some big changes in our demographics in our region. So a couple of populations saw an increase. The minority population increased from about 28% of our region population to 36.5%. The number of people, or the percent of people with limited English proficiency, increased about 0.5% to over 11% of our population. We also saw two population groups had a bit of a decrease, the low-income population and the youth population. The low-income percent of the population with a low income is down to about 20% of our population, and youth population is down to about just under 19%. And the people with disabilities and older adults stayed relatively steady at about 10% and 7%, 6 and 6.9% respectively. You also see in the reports, if you read through it, that there are maps that show where different populations groups live in our region and kind of the percentage of each population in census block groups throughout the region. Next slide. So this chart shows the share of dollars spent on MPO target funded projects that are located near and are therefore assumed to benefit minority and low income populations over the past 5 TIPs. So those are the solid lines. And the dotted lines, which we compare to, is their percent of the region's population. So those dashed lines. You'll want to focus on that difference between the two lines, between the share of funding benefiting each population and its share of the region's population. So we'll start with the minority population. And you'll note, first of all, that there's a sharp jump in the 2023 TIP, and that is solely due to the availability of new census data from the 2020 census, not due to any kind of changes in analysis or changes in projects that were programmed. The solid blue line is the percent of the total TIP funding that would benefit the minority population, and the dashed blue line is the percent of the population in the region. And so we see that there is quite a big difference between the percent of that population in the region and the money that's allocated or that is serving those population groups and likely benefiting them. So that is a bit of a concerning trend that we're seeing. We did the same analysis for the low income population. The solid yellow line is the percent of the total TIP funding allocated to benefit the low income population, and the dashed is the percent of the population in the region. You also note that starting in 2022 TIP, that there is a big kind of a decrease. That decrease is solely due to how we now measure low income status. It used to be a household-based measure, household income-based measure, and it's now a poverty-based measure. So don't compare those two two parts of the line graph. But what we do see is that consistently that the funding allocated to low income population is a bit below the percent of the population in the region. Next slide. So these another analysis that we do for Title VI reporting is to look at the funding per capita ridership for public transit projects. We compared per capita funding for the minority population to non-minority population and the low-income population to the non-low-income population across the last 5 TIPs. So ridership is based on pre-COVID passenger surveys, so it does not reflect any changes since then. And so as I mentioned, the MPO has the ability to approve all projects funded in the TIP, including all transit projects from MTA, MBTA, MWRTA, and CADA. And so that includes, so this particular graph includes all of those projects as well as the MPO's target funded projects. Since the 2019 TIP, per capita funding has decreased for all population groups showed on the screen by about 1/3 for the low income and minority populations and just under 1/2 for the non-minority and non-low income populations. But regardless of that level, funding has remained consistently less per capita for the minority population and low income population. I should say, when I say population, in this particular case, I mean ridership. It's not actually the population in the region, it's per capita funding for ridership. Next slide, please. This is the same idea. This chart shows the analysis for just target funded transit projects, so just projects that we at the MPO fund. As you would expect, funding is a lot lower compared to what is spent from the region and from all sources, as you saw in the previous chart. We do see a similar trend, however. Transit funding has decreased over the past 5 years by over 50% for all population groups. However, since the 2021 TIP, there has been an uptick in funding. The initial decrease likely came from the completion of the Green Line extension, so funding overall to transit project would have decreased after that. And then the recent uptick is likely due to the implementation of Community Connections Program and the funding of projects like Columbus Avenue bus lanes and refurbishment of the Lynn and Forest Hill stations that we funded. However, we still see the funding for low income and minority populations remains below funding for non-minority and non-low income populations. Next slide, please. So this next analysis, or I should say the analysis results, many of you will be familiar with. In each LRTP, a long-range transportation plan, we conduct a disparate impact and disproportionate burden analysis to determine if projects that we fund would likely cause disparate impacts on minority populations or disproportionate burdens on low-income populations. We conducted the analysis in the last long-range transportation plan, Destination 2040. That was almost 4 years ago at this point. This table shows the full results, or shows the results, and you can see the full content in the Title VI report. But to summarize, we did not find any disparate impacts or disproportionate burdens across any of the 8 metrics that we analyzed, which were access to jobs, access to retail, access to healthcare and higher education, travel time, carbon monoxide emissions, and congested VMT. We will be conducting the DID, the disparate impact and disproportionate burden analysis again this year in Destination 2050, so keep an eye out for that when it comes in a couple of months. Next slide. So this final analysis is one of the Title VI analyses that we actually do each year in Chapter 6 of the TIP to assess the impacts of projects the MPO has elected to fund. There are several analyses in that chapter, which you can also find in the appendices of the Title VI report, but I want to focus on the emissions reduction analysis, which is really a piece of good news, I think, which I hope is a good thing to kind of end on here. The chart compares the emissions from TIP projects between minority and non-minority populations, between low-income and non-low-income populations, and between people with limited English proficiency and English speakers. What we want to see is the line trending downwards on each chart, which would show that the equity population is getting the same emissions reduction benefit or a greater reduction compared to their non-equity population counterpart. The good news is that over the past 3 TIPs, this has been happening. For the minority and non-minority population, the difference in emission reductions between the 2 populations is nearly at 0. The same is true for people with limited English proficiency compared to English speakers. And for the low-income population and non-low-income population, it has gone below 0, which indicates that in the last TIP, the target-funded projects reduced emissions for the low-income population by more than for the non-low-income population. Again, this is an analysis that we do in every TIP, so do keep an eye on it for in the 2024 TIP. There are several more analyses in the Title VI report that I encourage you to take a look at, but these were the big highlights that I wanted to bring to all of your attention. Next slide. So to wrap up, I want to highlight some of our public engagement and data collection activities related to Title VI and equity more generally. This is one of the things that we were asked to describe in the Title VI report. You can read in more detail what that work entails in the report. But just to summarize, to touch on public engagement, to start, the foundation for our public engagement for Title VI and environmental justice is developing and strengthening community relationships with protected populations. This approach really requires understanding the historical and demographic context of the communities we engage with and a commitment to meeting those communities where they are by developing creative and flexible engagement strategies that meet their interests and needs. Approaches include attending both virtual and in-person community meetings and events, building trust with small-scale civic, neighborhood, and advocacy organizations, and partnering with those organizations to distribute surveys and conduct focus groups in languages other than English. By building these relationships, we can better identify the transportation needs in these communities. And one of the major efforts to do so has been ongoing is the long-range transportation plan needs assessment. And as we work on Destination 2050. We're also concurrently working on the Coordinated Human Services Transportation Plan, one of the main functions of which is to identify unmet transportation needs for seniors and people with disabilities. We facilitate engagement a lot as well through our planning processes. Some major efforts to do so recently included the Long-Range Transportation Plan DIDB policy, updating our TIP criteria in 2021, and MPO studies like access to the Blue Hills and identifying transportation inequities in the Boston region, which you heard about in recent board meetings. And data collection, to wrap up, and analysis is also the other bedrock of the MPO's Title VI and equity work, without which it would really be impossible to do our work. The program's key data source is the Census Bureau and the demographic data that it collects through its several surveys. But as we move toward it, trying to better understand the impacts of MPO investments rather than just looking at funding, it is critical to explore other data sources such as safety data, air quality, climate, destination data. And the CTPS's new data program is central to advancing the Title VI program and equity more broadly by allowing us to capitalize on emerging data sets, demographic and otherwise, new analysis tools and ways to display and communicate results. So I'm hopeful that you'll begin to see the results of that collaboration over the next months and years. Next slide. So I'm happy to take any questions right now, and then I ask for the board to vote to release the 2022 Title VI Triennial Report for public review starting Monday, January 23rd. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. Questions from the members? Lynn Diggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As always, Betsy, Ms. Harvey, great work. I just have a question on, I think it's on page 12, relating to Randolph. I just want to make sure I understand what you're getting at here. So you say that in Randolph, where 73.4% of the population is minority, there were only 6 studies, and you contrast that to Boston, which has 60 studies. Now I understand, that equity is not treating everyone the same. And that when you have a disadvantaged population, you need to provide that population with more in order to get them to adequate resources. But given the presumed smaller size of the Randolph population, is that the fact that they have only 6 studies an issue, you think? Or I'm just trying to get at what we're getting at by isolating that number and making it, giving it a higher profile.
Yeah, I think what Len is referring to is with the UPWP, we look at the demographics of the municipalities, and so people of communities of color and low-income folks and people limited English proficiency, and look at how many studies have we put in those communities relative to their demographics. How many studies have we done in those communities? And it's a tricky one because studies, sometimes they're region-wide, sometimes they're, more often region-wide than kind of focused on a municipality. What we try to do is at least get a sense of how many studies are we, where are we doing our studies, and what are the demographics of those communities in which we're doing studies. But you're right. I mean, that is one number. It is looking at just, for example, the minority population. My point with that comparison was that Boston has a very high minority population, as does Randolph, percent minority population, as does Randolph. We do a lot of studies in Boston, perhaps not so many in Randolph, but I think you have a good point, is that there are other kind of factors at play, as also the number of people that a study is potentially serving. So that's kind of what we were getting at in that particular comparison. So
yeah, just trying to understand. Not a criticism, and the other is so along with the amount of money spent per person, there's and maybe, I can't really bring up the chart right now, but there was one where it's like, for, I think it was like low income or minority, there's 55 or 60% of the amount spent, per person. I think this was for the transit, data, versus a non-minority, or non-low income. And do you think density, where those folks are located, may have something to do with that? For instance, if they're in more dense areas, because a dollar spent on transit, or let's make it more reasonable, $1 million spent on transit in a more dense area, will serve a lot more people. So then the per unit, or the per person amount spent will be less, but the benefit is nonetheless there for them. Or am I missing something?
I think in this particular case, not so much, because we're looking at ridership and not where people live. So you could live, one place, but you're taking the red line a lot to work or something. So it is a different measure than what we might use in other situations, because we actually have ridership data for transit.
Gotcha. And but even before I was thinking about that, but even so, okay, because I was thinking, well, yeah, it is ridership, but you could have ridership in dense areas and you have more people, but you're controlling for that is essentially what I'm hearing you saying.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Other questions? Seeing none, can I get a motion in a second to release this report for a 21-day public review process? Lynn Diggins.
I am delighted to make a motion to release this study, this report for 30-day review
21
period. 21 day, I'm sorry, 21-day review period. Thank you.
No, Mr. Chair, it actually is for a 30-day.
Oh, I'm sorry, Lynn, you were right. It is for 30 days.
No problem. I make
Got it.
mistakes.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Director Assa.
I will second that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ally Clayman,
Ally Clayman, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Amira Patterson,
Amira Patterson, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Bill Conroy,
Bill Conroy, I want to, Clint, sorry I didn't mute myself. It had nothing to do with Betsy's report. It had something to do with some other city stuff. So sorry I did not mute myself, but yes, my response is yes. Thank you.
okay. Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Austin Saganowitz,
Austin Zaganowicz, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Melissa Tentakoulis,
Melissa Tintopoulos, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
Peter Pelletier,
Peter Pelletier, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries unanimous, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Next item on the agenda is member items. Are there any? Lynn Diggins.
Yes, a quick one. I misspoke earlier when I said the MPO has a community transit program, has community connections program. So maybe we could correct that in the minutes. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries. Other comments or member items? Seeing none, can I get a motion in a second from a member to adjourn? Eric Barassa.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Tom Bent.
Mr. Chair, I'll second that.
Thank you. Remember, everybody, we're meeting next week as well as the week after. And thank you all. With that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a good one.